Very good day, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Coronavirus Series Automotive Supply Chain June Monthly Update. I'm Christopher Ludwig, Editor-in-Chief here at Ultima Media and Automotive Logistics and AMS, and it's my pleasure to welcome you once again to our ongoing weekly series and to our special set of monthly updates when we take the time to not only look at some of the operational developments and ongoing ongoing changes that are happening in the crisis, but also look a bit more strategically at what's going on. In today's focus, we have a couple of special guests, some key leaders in the supply chain space from both Volkswagen Group of America and Visteon. And not only are we looking to learn a bit more about some of the specific things happening in the supply chain in their companies, in their respective companies, but we also want to talk about leadership in a crisis. Automotive supply chains clearly are about maintaining operations, optimizing networks, connectivity, lots of different technology, and obviously serving customers and producing vehicles and serving customers. But it's also very much, as you know, a people business. And leadership is important, and I can't think of any time when leadership decision making has been more important than it is in the last 4 or 5 months since we've been going through this crisis. And there's many lessons that we think are interesting to learn and observe, which we're keen to talk to our guests about today. So in a way, we'll be covering, if you like, some operational issues as well as the leadership side. And I welcome any of your questions and comments as we go. Please don't hesitate to put them into the question box, as you by now hopefully are familiar if you've been tuning in each week, as well as your comments and thoughts along the way. But before we bring on our guest, I'd like to go through our usual weekly update of what's happening in the sector, and talk about some of the trends that we continue to see in the automotive supply chain during this crisis. So before we really start, though, let me say some words about our special partners for the Automotive Livestream and Coronavirus series, and for our wider Automotive Festival transformation. C&W Courier Network, which is a key premium freight and expedited logistics provider serving the global sector. Horizon Auto Logistics, port, terminal, and vehicle logistics provider with some exciting operations in North America and elsewhere. A new supporter, Inform, key software and optimization provider for automotive and other logistics sectors, and particularly for some areas of finished vehicle logistics. Proact International, another important automotive supply chain and logistics IT and software provider with a lot of focus in vehicle logistics. And Fract Logistics Solutions, again, a key technology logistics IT provider specialized in the automotive sector. Don't think it's a coincidence that many of our providers serve the global sector, or that they're digital and IT focused, because so much of that is coming to rise in importance, of course, today. So thanks again to our partners. A couple of words about our guests who have joined me today on the show, and looking forward to having your questions and comments about them too. Anu Goel is Executive Vice President for Group After Sales and Service for Volkswagen Group of America. That means his responsibilities really cover both after sales, service parts, networks, as well as the vehicle logistics and distribution side. We're also very pleased to have Antonio Marcelo, Vice President for Global Supply Chain at Visteon, of course, an important tier supplier and highly electronics focused and new technology, and has a lot of interesting projects and developments going on in the global supply chain, as well as, of course, dealing with the crisis. So just a quick couple of words of what our rundown. We'll have some time with Anu talking about developments in the supply chain for Volkswagen in North America. We'll talk with Antonio as well about how Visteon has been managing disruption. Apologies for the sounds of the sirens of London, which you can hear. Had to keep the window open today because we're near enough 30 degrees in London. So we might have a couple of environmental disturbances along the way. So apologies in advance. We'll also have, again, our panel discussion with our guests, including the issues of supply chain leadership that we talked about. Let's just run quickly through some of the key developments that continue along the week as we follow up. Of course, we continue to see ramp ups in many regions, obviously with a mixed pace. Most of Europe is open, and we do have some brands who are increasing shifts, either going from 1 to 2 shifts, a few even going to 3, or moving on to extended shift patterns, but largely speaking, still at quite a reduced capacity. North America, pretty much all online now, especially after Volkswagen was able to restart in Puebla last week. So pretty much all the plants are online, not necessarily at full capacity, but moving pretty quickly towards it, it would seem. And a number of OEMs in particular expect or already are at pre-corona levels, especially where they're replacing depleted truck and SUV inventory. In Brazil, probably the epicenter of the crisis in many ways right now, but we know that Ford restarted its plant in Camaçari, and I believe that was one of the last plants to restart, that will restart at least. So again, even in the midst of that pandemic, we are seeing the lockdowns continue to ease and plants resume production, albeit again at low paces. Some reasonable good news out of Japan too, as more OEMs start to get back to pre-crisis levels. But you know, as I said, it's far from smooth sailing all around. We see, you know, localized breakouts or continuing crisis in India. That was particularly the case. Tamil Nadu has reimposed lockdown in some key areas, including Chennai and other cities in June, and there's another one coming up, I believe, in a couple of days. That's already impacting the production in some of those regions, like the Ford and Renault Nissan, and indeed all the suppliers are there as well. So tough situation there, and I think that's emblematic of what we might see in some of the high-risk areas, or even the areas which have moved through the crisis. Other plants remain down or with prolonged shutdowns, largely because of demand slow to pick up or model changes, particularly we see in Europe, and similar, you know, reduced output for some brands where exports are low. And you know, again, just highlighting there the key risks that that come in certain regions where certainly the rates remain high, and we might see some localized disruption there. That's sort of the story. These are some of the key headlines, if you like, and the key trends and what's challenging the supply chain, and certainly part of what any supply chain leader needs to navigate in this picture now. As we mentioned, we talked already about some of those localized restrictions coming in. We might seem unlikely to move back to a national lockdown so quick, but we do need to manage probably localized issues which could impact demand or supply. And indeed, the volatility of demand is going to continue to be a big question, depending on things like incentives and seasonality, and how that will impact on forecasting and on demand in the coming months. We have other issues as well, whether you see the total collapse of the rental and fleet market in parts of Europe and North America. That will impact as well on the automotive supply chain too, not least in the reduced volumes and capacity. Still dealing with naturally liquidity issues. Hopefully that's improving, but there's risks that were there, especially as other disruptions come. And when we look across the logistics network, you know, we definitely see an improving picture. Capacity is returning. We've seen reductions in blank sailings, some aspects of air freight coming back, rail networks restoring capacity on the automotive side, but nonetheless, clearly there are still challenges across the board there. Nonetheless, hopefully moving in the right direction. I think we couldn't really avoid talking about the trade tensions, which are certainly there, potentially escalating. India seeming to make headlines for plenty of the wrong reasons this week, and obviously its border issues with China have reportedly led to some customs issues and some imports, halts and stops, which could hit the sector badly. We've also seen some states make moves to block investments from Chinese brands, so a worrying situation between China and India for sure, and that obviously comes on top of plenty of other trade disputes and discussions, which many of you obviously know about, from Brexit to US tariffs to other threats kind of being imposed. So again, just adds even more volatility to an already tense and difficult situation, and complicates supply chain leadership even more. I'm not going to go into loads of depth here. We highlighted some of these last week, but I just wanted to continue to point out some of the short-term and long-term trends that we're seeing across the sector, whether short-term reducing model configurations and prioritization of key models, but obviously in the long term we do see bigger impacts to platforms being reduced, to lower R&D costs and simplify the supply chain where possible. So it's more automation in the face of rising costs and new requirements, potential shifts in changing in sourcing and inventory management, whether that's in plant locations or in warehousing and DC locations, and indeed the rise and we think permanent shift towards more online sales and service for automotive, be that for vehicle sales, home and home delivery, and also on the service side as well. So these are just some of the key things which we continue to cover and pick up and are keen to keep talking to you all about. When we talk about supply chain leadership, which is some of the topics we want to talk about today, I just thought I'd highlight a few things that the crisis has certainly brought to bear. I think all of us have learned new ways, have adapted to new ways of working and engaging teams, not least with remote working and tools and technology. Certainly some of that is likely to be positive and probably even permanent for how we work going forward. What does it mean in the supply chain? What does it mean in an industry which also has lots of operations behind it as well? I think in this crisis, you can also talk about the purpose of supply chain management and our leaders, whether it was supporting the relief effort early on and dealing with the safety and protecting of workers, staff, and customers, to the more strategic side now of rebuild and recovery. And obviously some interesting and dynamic playbooks there, which we'll perhaps talk to our guest about as well today. The importance of supply chain. I think you can read about supply chain in a lot more of the press now. Government officials talk about the importance of resilience, and it's being recognized, not least through other sectors too, like the medical side. But automotive, certainly this is being seen as more critical as well. So hopefully, and maybe that has an impact on it too. We've talked about this a lot, and I think we've done polls which most of you overwhelmingly agree. The acceleration of digital transformation in the supply chain, be it in logistics, tools and communication, be it in automation, be it on the online sales side. So these are key things for leaders to consider, not least in where they might make investments and make changes, especially at these sort of straitened times. Further collaboration, cross-functionality, whether that's with suppliers or across our teams. So, those are just a few highlights from the leadership side. And before we turn to our first guest, as we do, I'd like to just take a poll to get some of your opinions. Now, one aspect of managing a crisis, and especially one like this, is how well you can respond to further, let's say, disruptions. And so let's talk about how well the crisis is preparing us for potential further disruption and reimposition of restrictions, as we see in places like India. So are your supply chain and operations prepared to operate should you face further restrictions due to the pandemic? So would you say, yes, you have contingency plans in place? Are you somewhat prepared so you can respond to some restrictions, but probably not all, or very little? Is it basically just likely to stop you altogether if this comes, and so there's little contingency to have there? So I can see many of you are voting, so hopefully that comes up. Just give us your opinion on that to get a sense. Clearly there are certain things we couldn't do anything about, but given the likelihood of some targeted restrictions, I think it's important to see how well prepared we are. Okay, so most of you have voted now, so let's go ahead and close the poll, and I'll share the results because they're fairly encouraging, I think. So 54% say, yes, we have continuity plans in place. So you're obviously looking at this, and 39% are somewhat. So obviously the overwhelming majority are looking and careful about this, and most of you don't feel you'd be caught out entirely, but nonetheless, obviously some challenges ahead there. Okay, well, thanks for that. I think with that, I'd like to actually turn now to our first guest. Goel, as I mentioned, is the Executive Vice President for Service Parts of Volkswagen Group of America. He joins us from Detroit, I believe. So Anu, when you're ready, can you join me on stage? There you are, Anu. Great to see you. Thanks for being with us today.
Hey, Chris, thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem. So I think we might have just a slight delay on the sound there, but I'm sure it'll clear up in a moment. So let's just persevere with that for the moment and see. Anu, I thought, can we start with just a short status update on the operations that you're kind of overseeing in North America? Obviously the plants are back up, but obviously you still have your dealers. are the dealers are back up and running in terms of the service parts side? What about your facilities? And we'll turn maybe to some of the vehicle logistics side. So a bit of a status update as it stands right now.
All right. We can just start with the plants, as you mentioned. Our U.S. facility in Chattanooga, Tennessee, went live mid-May. Obviously not at full speed, as a wrap up, as you had previously mentioned. And Playbook came back online last week and is in the process of wrapping up as well. So production has restarted. The challenge there was obviously safety of employees, getting people in, and then the supply base, right? So cautiously optimistic, starting to go. If you go to the infrastructure that we have with our ports have been open since the pandemic. There was a 2-week period of time that our Chattanooga facility was down with a confirmed case, right? So you always have evolving CDC guidelines, but we had a confirmed case. Employee is safe and well. There was no spread, but we did shut that facility down, or the port operations there for a little while, but it happened during the plant shutdown. But they're all open, as are our depots throughout the country, and they have been since day one as well. Both ports and depots have been classified as essential services, which is why they were there and working. So full credit to the teams to keep that part of the business running. We did have a similar to the shutdown in Chattanooga with a confirmed case. We did in one of our depots as well, and that required shut that down. How do you service the dealers that face that location from other areas? You go to just the emergency orders only. You provide full service, right? So we did a combination as it went along. So from that perspective, all set. And arguably more importantly, our dealers. And if you look at this in a couple of different ways, you got the sales departments, service departments, and parts departments. So if you break that down, in general, sales departments were viewed as non-essential. And if you just tracked it from the pandemic, at one point we had 60–70% of our dealers' sales rooms were closed, right? They're basically all back online now. Even those that were closed, majority were able to still provide online sales. So some activity, but as the pandemic was rising in March, April, obviously with restrictions, non-essential business, sales rooms are closed. Parts and service departments were deemed as essential businesses, so those were open. So unless the dealer had a confirmed case, those kept running. But parts departments in general have been 99% open since the pandemic started. Service departments, less so. The bigger issue in the service departments was reducing capacity, right? So number of service techs, number of bays open. So as the volume had dropped, our dealerships reduced service capacity by reducing hours and techs, right? So if you view it in 3 different ways, sales departments in general closed, but now basically open. Service departments were open, but reduced capacity. And parts departments were open and running.
Okay, yeah. Thanks for sort of the overview there. That's really helpful in terms of kind of seeing the kind of capacity getting back online in your operation. So if we were to start on the service side, for example, would you say that you're up, the volume and operations are kind of close to where they were before? Oh, okay. Sorry about that. I think we'll be having a few connection issues there. Can you hear me, Anu?
Yeah, I get you back. Sorry.
Okay, great. So apologies if anyone's getting a few interruptions there, but we'll bear through it because that's what we'll do. Yeah, I wanted to get a sense of how you feel the market and volume is starting to recover on the different sides of the business as you move through it, and perhaps the capacity to sort of serve that. So in terms of the service parts, you obviously talked about what's coming back up to capacity. Are you seeing volume returning on that side, and with it the network's ability to manage it?
All right, so let's start with the vehicle side. Vehicle sales have been surprisingly good. And we as a company have actually gained a little bit of market share as we've gone through this. The issue on the vehicle sales side is, what did you think would happen with customer demand, right? Pent-up demand or continued demand, it has been there. It varies by pockets of the country, right? So there were fewer restrictions in the Southwest when the pandemic started. So if you looked at the data, it kind of skewed it toward trucks, which is not what we do. But you had to look at the data by the area of the country. But for us in general, vehicle demand has been good. The issue on the vehicle side has been availability of inventory, right? With the plants going down, we didn't have as many vehicles as we would like of key product to keep moving. So we did lots of things, right? We had some vehicles in parts of the country that were on shutdown. We moved them to areas that were selling, right? So you try to make those trade-offs to keep the sales side moving. Now, as the plants come back on, and we're focusing on the key products first, there's obviously a lot of focus to expedite those and get those out as soon as possible, right? So that's moving and has been moving. On the parts side, we've been pleasantly surprised. You can listen to all the people that say there's fewer miles being driven, so obviously less collisions, less need for maintenance like repair, et cetera. And depending on which brand you look at, we had expected anywhere from a 50 to 70% drop at its bottom on parts and service. And that has not materialized to that level. Obviously, there has been a drop, but it's been more in the range of 40, 50, 55%, maybe 60 at its bottom. Is now recovering. We're currently running about 20% down from what we had planned. So you talk about a U curve or a V curve. On the parts side, it's been a V curve or a V recovery, right? So fingers crossed on that end. But I can't really put a finger on for you why that has been. If you look at it, I think it's maintenance and light repair business. I think some of the independent repair shops have been slower to come back up than us. I also believe some consumers are happy with either the contactless service we're providing, the timeliness of the service, or the cleanliness of the service, right? Than some independent repair shop may give them. So bottom line, I think we may be getting some customers that we had not previously.
Okay, well, I mean, there's some encouraging signs there for sure. In terms of on the vehicle side, well, if we look at Mexico, so obviously Mexico is just opened, as you mentioned earlier, and I mentioned at the top. You know, in terms of depleting, refilling some of your inventory, you know, when do you expect to start seeing volumes moving from Mexico, and you know, are there any challenges you're seeing or anticipating in getting product, you know, from Mexico to dealers?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the plant's just basically starting up. The first vehicles will be coming out shortly. We bring vehicles in from Mexico with two methods, rail and vessel. And, you know, it'll take anywhere from 8 to 20 plus days to get those vehicles on the ground in the US ports. So we're still a few weeks away from having vehicles that are produced now land in ports to be able to get to our dealers. So it's not, obviously not a June sales impact. We'll be counting on some of those vehicles for July, right? Mid to late July. Right, so in terms of any issues we see in the supply chain getting them here right now, knock on wood, no. And you know, if something happens with vessels, you always, you know, you can try to get the option for rail, et cetera, hoping not to have to do that. But right now, things are looking okay. One of the things that has been a pleasant surprise through all this is the resilience of our suppliers and our carriers. So I give them all the credit in the world. They've hung in there, and they're raring to go.
Fantastic. So, you know, actually on the staying on the vehicle side for the moment there, In terms of the rail network, clearly that had been something which had a lot of equipment had been in storage and perhaps was slow to start up. Are we seeing that kind of return reasonably quickly, or are there some potential issues as we kind of move into recovery here?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to these types of things, I never say it'll go smoothly, right? When you bring the machine, the global machine, like we had, to a halt, right, where you're parking ships in at anchor, wherever they were in the world during the pandemic, and you idle thousands of miles of rail cars, right? It's going to take where they need to be. But given the volumes that we have, right, with the ramp up, it's not like we need to go 100% day one. So I think it'll take time to get back to where it needs to be. But I think the production schedules will help facilitate as we get things back in the right place and moving again, right? If every OE was going live with full manufacturing day one, yeah, we'd be having a different conversation.
Absolutely. I suppose that's an advantage, that it's been somewhat staggered in that way. Maybe another point on the network before we kind of start moving into leadership discussion. Oh, can you still hear me? Okay, great. In terms of the ports, so I know Volkswagen was adding a port, I believe, this year at Sparrows Point in Baltimore. Is that still on track? Have you changed timings or had to make other adjustments in the port network, given also what you mentioned earlier, having to move some cars to different parts of the country?
Yeah, great question. In terms of the port, yes, it's on track. We have the keys. We've taken possession. The only cars that are currently in there are those that we've sent in for training for accessories installation. So everything that's going on has obviously required us to change our go live plan with vehicles arriving for that port to process. I think that building will be a couple months later coming up to actually process vehicles than we had expected. Right, we're still moving those because that port was primarily going to take some volume out of Davisville and some from Jacksonville. So we'll obviously be getting cars to cut our dealer body through those two ports until we can get some critical volume where we can put a vessel or rail into Baltimore to load it up. So yes, it's on track. Yes, we have it. Is it operating and shipping cars to dealers at the present time? No, it's a couple of months down the road. Hell of a facility, though.
Well, we look forward to seeing it when we can.
Yeah.
I think we're going to talk some leadership questions when we bring Antonio in at the end bit. But what would you say are some of the key lessons that you've been taking away in this over the last 3 or 4 months? In managing this in your sort of role? I mean, clearly there's a lot of different operational things, but any kind of particular highlights that you'd want to point to right now?
I guess I'd summarize it this way. It's gone in cycles, right? I still remember on March 12th where we made the decisions to close the buildings and send people home. Right? And people were walking out thinking they were going to be back in a week, right? And then that became 2, and then that became 3. So people go from, I don't believe this is happening, can't be real, to, oh my God, panic. And what I think it's incumbent on leaders, and one of the things we've learned is you need a plan, something that people can work towards and have confidence in, right? So the cycles you go through are in whatever playbook that you have for the business, ensure safety of our employees and our families, right? First and foremost, that's who we are as a company, so we care about. That's the first focus. Second becomes the health of the company, right? So you focus on your liquidity plans, right? So how do you maintain a viable business with a fraction of your revenue for, at that time, you plan 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, right? So you figure that out. Then you've got to figure out how do you bring production down safely, right? What are the essential businesses that you have to keep going, provide safety for the employees as you go through that? Then you work on your restart plan, right? And then, which is where we've been through, and now the focus is, what's this going to look like, or what should we look like going forward? Because this is the new normal, and it will be for the next 12 to 18 months. So for example, learnings that we've had. So in the past, contact centers were always viewed as, you have to be on site, right? The people have to be together. It's the way it has to run. Then it was, all right, let's give people laptops and some can work from home, and right, we'll find a balance. Now we've demonstrated contact centers can work from home for the foreseeable future. So if you plan out your office requirements looking ahead, I don't need to plan for several hundred people to be in that office, right? So what we will look like facility-wise going forward, or our real estate footprint will change. So the lessons learned, right, long-winded answer to your question, is you have to have a purpose, you have to have a playbook and a strategy, stick to it, and things are going to change day to day, and if you focus on the negative, you're going to lose, right? You just need to adapt quickly and keep going and give people that purpose.
Giving people purpose, that sounds like a great takeaway from that. Anu, we're gonna bring you back in a little while. I'm gonna turn now to my next guest, Antonio. So thank you for some of that insight and updates. It's really valuable and useful to know on both the service sides and vehicle side. So we'll bring you back in probably 15-20 minutes when we talk a little bit more in the panel discussion. In the meantime, thank you for now. And again, anybody who has further questions they want to put to Anu, do put them, and we'll address them when he's back. There's already a few that have already come in. So thanks again, Anu. So my next, we'll speaking a bit. So my next guest is Antonio Manuel Marcelo, Vice President of Global Supply Chain, as I mentioned before, at Visteon. And again, an interesting company because it's been through so many transformations long before COVID. And so it's I think it's really exciting to get a chance to welcome Antonio to talk about some of that. Antonio, can you connect and join us from Portugal? Antonio, great to see you.
Hello, good afternoon.
Yeah, very good afternoon. It's for those of us who aren't in Europe right now, we're both experiencing some heat waves. So I think glad that we can both connect in these sunny times in otherwise difficult, challenging circumstances. Antonio, can we start similarly with a bit of an overview and sort of status update on Visteon supply chain and production? Obviously, you oversee the global supply chain. In general, have all your plants and facilities reopened? Do you have places which are still closed or reclosed? And kind of what kind of capacity level? So if you could just give us a sort of brief update.
Okay, good afternoon again. Within Visteon, we have all our plants across the world operational, which means that we are in condition really to fulfill all our customer requirements. Of course, that the situations on the different areas of the world, they are completely different. And you just mentioned in your opening one example, probably the one that at this point of time we have the lowest activity is in India, essentially because we have our plant in India is on Chennai area, and due to the latest government regulations, of course, that we are having minimum activity, but we are still working. And at this point of time, we really can mention that we have all plants across the world really working and ready really to fulfill all our customer requirements.
Okay, well, I mean, that's great. And I think it speaks to where we are in the crisis now, even in places where it's still very significant, we're having to find ways to operate. In terms of the supply chain, are you dealing with any kind of specific particular bottlenecks, shortages, whether that's on the supply side or components? I know that in the electronic space where Visteon is very active, clearly there's always some challenges there. I wonder if you can give us any insights.
Of course, that within Visteon, I always mention that we are part of two really important business on today's business environment. One that is really the challenge automotive industry, and also we shared a lot of suppliers to really to the consumers industry, which really is always coming through really the launches of excitement products and so on. And really this always creates some difficult seasonal difficulties based on the launch, based on the situations on the world, which means that within Visteon, we are really used to have a certain regular and seasonable shortage due to these business conditions. And taking this in consideration, we always created within Visteon a team that we call supply continuity, that is always looking through these situations around the world. Of course, that the situation that we are living right now, COVID, is nothing when really we compare, one example, to the situation of the earthquake on Japan or to other natural disasters. No, this went really to a level that nobody was thinking about this when really in China, everybody went really to the Chinese New Year, knowing that really it was extended shutdown on the Chinese New Year. But I really need to mention that really within Visteon, we are always prepared to these situations, and I think that this one went really far from the limits that we are used to it. But I think that we have a terrific team, and I think that the team really did really well through all this crisis.
Great, and we'll talk about some of that too in terms of how teams perhaps have collaborated in new ways. When you look at some of the logistics services and capacity and networks, are you still kind of confronted with quite a few challenges there? I mean, we've talked a lot about things like limits in container schedules and air freight and stuff. Are these improving, or are they still quite challenging?
They're still quite challenging. One of the situations, of course, that transportation is one that is really challenged, as within Visteon and electronics, we really use air freight really to move some of our products, and of course that we don't normally under normal operating conditions, we don't use only the cargo transportation. We also use commercial airlines, and really in order really to move cargoes from the different parts of the world to our plants and to our manufacturing places. And of course, as you can imagine, also with the cancellation of most of really the flights around the world, of course that we face a certain level of constraint sometimes in order really to assure that we'll have always the space required really to move our products, and for them really to move and really to be at the right time at the right place. Of course that this is transportation at this point of time is probably one of the biggest constraints that requires for us really to keep extra control on it, and also really to work closely with our carriers in order really to be sure that really everything will happen according to the plans.
So that's obviously interesting, in the focus that it needs. Now, one thing that we've spoken about a bit before is some of the initiatives that Visteon has undertaken to improve its visibility, its control towers, and I believe linking up some of its systems beforehand. And I thought it would be worth hearing a little bit about that, Antonio, in terms of some of the digital systems and improvements that you've made, which I believe have helped in this case as well.
Yes, of course that within Visteon we started on this transformation to digitalization a few years ago, and of course that we started as any other company on the different levels, growing essentially really to the data analytics, essentially really cleaning up the data, structuring the data, and assuring that the data that sometimes makes sense on the certain environment, on the certain plant, and the certain dimension, when really we put everything together, they will continue really to make sense and really will be have the use to it. Of course that this mission that really we start a few years ago, of course that it was something that at this point of time we can mention that it was really important for us to be able today really to have the output that we are having on the Visteon supply chain. essentially because this allows us really, and you know when these situations they come on the supply continuity, is always a special requirements for you to really to provide information to suppliers, information internal within the company, information really to the customers, and most of the people really they spend time in really assuring that really you prepare the reports, you have the valid information, and you provide this really to the customers and really to the suppliers. Within Visteon, due to these steps that we are being taken since years, I think that we come and to this time already with a certain level of information, a certain level of really reports and information that really we can really make it available just by a push button. What this did and really help us a little bit in optimizing our focus. Instead of us really to looking, really to trying to understand where the things are and trying really to look for the data that really it was essentially past data. Essentially, this was becoming available, as I mentioned, by a simple push button, and this will allow us really to focus the people and really looking to the future and really trying really to proactively and predictive and to do some level of predictive and really to understand where really our customers, what they are asking us and where we are going, and really trying really to look and really to interact with our supply chain on the best way, really to maximize and really to align the output with the customer needs, and also in a certain way really to maintain our key KPIs inside the organization at the level that is required in order for us really to continue really our competitiveness within the market that we are.
Fantastic. And what would you say? What are some of the key things that enabled that data at a push of a button? Was it kind of standardizing, come back-end systems? Was it some TMS or what was the kind of key? What were some of the key things that the Visteon has done?
Of course, that today in today's environment, one of the words that is also is common around the world is really dashboards, and we have several systems within the company, and we are really we developed within the Visteon supply chain. We developed a certain level of dashboards that really they are able really to combine data from the certain systems that are on the market, also really to join some information that comes from the customer portals or really from the suppliers. And I think that these dashboards that we developed and that they are able really to put all this data together, that's really what really in a certain way help us really to take the decisions and really to have information that will allow us always and continues really to do what if analysis based on the volatility, on the constant changes that the supply chain was receiving. Because one of the things that with COVID was different, and I think that it was already mentioned here, is that everybody was supposed really to stop 1 week, but after the 1 week turns 2 weeks, turns 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And at the point of time, it was supposed really to restart, and they didn't restart and delay 1 week. This uncertainty, it really required a lot that I call a yo-yo effect. It was really required for us really to have a clear visibility of the supply chain, the material on hand, the material in transit, and the material at the suppliers, in order for us really to take the best decisions and really to deliver to our business targets. Of course, that one of the situations that also all of this did, it's something that not all the people they are talking about. Everybody talks about visibility. That is something that I already mentioned, end to end. Everybody talks about transparency, because one of the things that all this COVID brought, it was really transparency. It was not only possible for you really to work within your company in order really to achieve the results and your goals. It was needed for you really to put suppliers, and sometimes the suppliers of your supplier, and also the customers all together, and really to have this visibility, not inside your company, but the visibility end to end involving suppliers and customers, and also to have transparency for you really to completely share all the data in order really to take the best decisions. Of course, that with these two situations came a third one that really I believe that it was really important, and I really believe that is one of the strengths within also Visteon, is that it's really the transversal work that was done inside the company across not only Visteon supply chain, but from the sales up to really the purchasing through all the departments. It was really all this pandemic brought really clear that really inside Visteon, all this transversal work was really good, and the way that really we interact with the teams, and which means communication really important. But not only internally, because I think that we established the regular communication with the customers. We are really providing important daily updates, and also with the suppliers, because at the end of the day, the suppliers, they are partners. And being partners, we work on all of this together. And being together, really, we were sharing all the information. We are sharing, one example, our minimum quantities to operate. We were really doing something that really, with our command center, we were able to do, because we have, with electronics, we have a special characteristics that really we have components that they are using on the different places on the world, which means that instead of really to balance really the deliveries to the different places, we're really balancing these deliveries based on the real needs and the complexity of the supply chain. And I think that all of this was really shared with the suppliers, and I think that really nothing end up yet, but up to the moment, I really can mention that really from the suppliers up to the customers, I think that we were really a great team dealing with this complexity.
I think that's a fantastic point, and something that I think we can talk about more when we bring Anu back as well, because that's something we certainly observed, is this tending towards integration, cross functionality and collaboration, which hopefully continues well after the crisis mode. But one of the other issues I wanted to ask about, and it's something that's come up on a question as well too, because we've heard a lot about risk to supplier liquidity, particularly perhaps at tier 2 and 3 level. And I wondered, in your role, are you monitoring risks in amongst your suppliers? Have you seen signs of that in terms of worries about suppliers being unable to operate or having financial liquidity issues? Is that part of the risk management process that you're doing?
Of course, that within Visteon, and as I mentioned, we consider the suppliers as partners, and we always look and we extend all our management through the supplier. The risk management part of it is not really part of really my organization. This is, but is being monitoring with the Visteon, and really within supply chain, we have a close contact with the area and the organization that really is monitoring this situation. And any time that is required for us really to establish a connection with the supplier, because they are living a more difficult moment due to this situation. Of course, that within Visteon we work together, and we automatically put all the efforts in order really to completely mitigate any risk that exists on our side. This is something that really also at this point of time, I didn't saw it a huge quantity of situations coming. I think that at this point of time, I think that I can consider that the situation and the way that the things are progressing is more or less at the normal level as I have to know.
Okay, fantastic. But I think I think let's bring Anu also back in, because we have a couple of questions that I think we can also address across the panel. So Anu, welcome back.
Hey.
Great, and I think actually our picture is coming through even a bit clearer there. So apologies if I was fading in and out before, but I think we're holding the line here, we're holding the connection. So both of you raised some lessons, if you like. Antonio, you were talking about more collaboration that you've seen, and I thought that was something would be worth asking you about in terms of, firstly, within Volkswagen, have you seen a change in how the teams have worked across departments or even regions to sort of manage this, and perhaps then also with the suppliers and your partners as well?
Yeah, the simple answer is yes. And I think part of what's happened is a cultural change. First, trying to get the key leaders together for meetings during work days. Everyone's busy. right? From 7 in the morning till 6 in the evening, it's just tough to get them. Now it seems that it's easier to get people onto key meetings, right? Just as a perception type thing. Second, I think we talked about purpose earlier. Everyone's working toward the same goal now because it's focused. There aren't 17 different priorities and things that people are working on. It's how do we build cars? How do we get them processed through the system to our dealers? How do we get parts in from our suppliers through our depots to our dealers? So some of the, you could argue ancillary projects that were out there, people are focusing on 1, 2, 3 years down the road, which are still important. There is an immediate need and focus. So I think you get everyone's attention and working toward a common goal versus individual department or functional goals. I also believe our communication with suppliers has increased X-fold, right? Because they're in the same situation with us on business liquidity. They need to know what's going on. They need to plan, right? They want to be there when we get going. So I just think the crisis in itself has eliminated, I don't know if the right word is distractions, or other things going on, and created 1, 2, 3 priorities that everyone is driving to deliver.
Fantastic. Yeah, thanks for that. So we have a few questions from the audience, sort of to do, I would say, with continuity plans and such. And one question I thought was interesting: as you're entering business resumption, how well designed were your business resumption plan? Was it an executable? So I guess, in going along, have you had to sort of adjust those plans from what you thought they would be, and what the lessons would be coming from that? Maybe Antonio, if I start with you, obviously it would be different in different regions, I'm sure, but in terms of your ramp up plan, has it had to change a lot as you've gone?
Yeah, for sure. That's one of the things that really, if really most of us, we heard before about PDCA cycles, the PDCA cycle. I think that it was something that on today's environment, we really were doing plans, and sometimes a few hours later, the plan was needed really to be changed, and it was needed really to be redo it and continuously. And this is something that really still today, and this is something that I really believe that really will stay on the future. We'll always remember is that this was, besides all the learning, was also a stress test to all our supply chain, to all our concepts, to all our processes. And one of the things that was important during this stress test, it was essential really one team really to work and really to address the supply continuity issues. But it was also important to learn from these supply continuity issues and for everything that is happening and what really needs to be done in terms of the processes, in terms of the standard work, in order for in the future for us really to take advantage of all this learning experience. But to answer your question, yes, the plans, they change frequently during the day, several times.
That ring true for you as well, Anu? Would you add anything to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I break the question down into 2 parts, right? First, to echo what and reinforce what Antonio said. The plans changed on arguably a hourly basis. Chattanooga was supposed to start, pick a date, April, right? Then delayed a week, then delayed a week, then delayed 3 days, then, right? Same thing happened in Mexico, and you just need to adjust and go with the flow. I actually became more surprised when a date that was committed actually happened, right? So you start to anticipate delays. So yeah, absolutely. And that to me just gets to the resiliency of the supply chain and the people and everyone that was involved. In terms of your question about the business continuity plans, every business has them. Some businesses view them as tick the box exercises, right? What I learned, and I think we fall into that camp to a certain extent as well. We go through an annual process, we review but you plan for a hurricane, you plan for a earthquake, you plan for power outages, right? A supplier going down or a fire. You did not plan for an extended pandemic, right? Well, you didn't plan for a pandemic and you didn't plan for an extended downtime. So I think we've gotten some learnings to take into future business continuity planning, because this was beyond anything that we had ever expected.
Absolutely, and there's a couple of questions which have come in, I think, along the lines of what kind of technology you may be using or turn to use to sort of help improve visibility or use data analytics to do this. So Antonio, you spoke quite a bit about actually what Visteon kind of had prepared and was doing that helped support it. But the question for both of you is: are you looking to new, or maybe not new? Are you looking at adapting tools that are helping you further in this to improve those plans and improve the visibility? So Antonio, is there anything kind of new which the crisis has made you turn to?
Essentially, the important part is really for us to have the data structured on the way that really we can use them. If we have the data, of course, that within Visteon, we use dashboards that really they are developed in one of the platforms that is available on the market. And I can mention, as soon as you have the data, as soon as you have data that has a certain reliability and really that trustable data, you can do everything. One example that you just, on the previous question, you asked about plans and changing the plans. I really can mention that really we had previous COVID, we had a certain level of dashboards that we were using to manage the business. When really this pandemic come, and when we start to use the dashboards, they had certain variables and the certain perspectives that were not adequate for the current situation, and automatically we had a team that were really creating new dashboards and changing the dashboards overnight, which really, if you ask me today, I didn't make this exercise, I'm sure that I'll do it at a point of time, but if I'm looking the dashboard that I'm using today really to run the business today, if I really go back really to the January, February timeframe, if really I'll look, if I will compare them, I really need to mention that the interactions that they went through, it was so many that even today, you can really not recognize one and the other one, because really they were going and being adjusted really to the new conditions. And but I think that is some dashboards, platforms at this point of time available on the market that really you can use either one. What is really important is for you to have data, clean data, meaningful data, and structured data that really you can use and be manipulated for these platforms.
Anything to that, Anu, from Volkswagen side?
Yeah, just a couple of comments. Everyone always wants to have more data, real-time data, etc. Question I was asked is, what would you do with it? And yes, there's always opportunity for us to improve and get that I don't know, enhanced, more robust, whatever words you'd want to use. The way we've looked at it here is that's good, but as we prioritized our liquidity, our cash flow, our investments, we focused on what's the customer expectation of us in the new normal. So we have, I won't say diverted, we have emphasized investment in contactless dealings with the customer, right? Things that we thought would be needed in the next 2 to 5 years, which were planned, right? An improved customer web portal for service. The ability to see, get video and chat with their tech in the service bay, right? Electronic payment, scheduling, et cetera. All that stuff was there and planned in cycle. The next 2 to 5 years. So what we did was we punted some other near-term, real-time, and pulled those into this year and the first half of next year. So we reprioritized technology toward customer-facing because we believe that's what's going to help grow the business going forward. And it's what the customer's expectation will be.
I mean, yeah, that's really a fascinating point, especially on the customer side. And is that equally so on the vehicle side? I mean, have you also seen more contactless delivery, home delivery even, or alternative delivery, if you like, during this period, you know, with online ordering and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, as the dealers had, once they were closing, they started using internet sales and e-commerce. Yeah, it's that's ramping up. I think it's a little quicker on the parts side than it is on the vehicle side. But I also believe dealers that aren't there are going to realize very quickly it's going to be a customer want and need and differentiator. So absolutely, that's exactly where this is headed.
Fascinating. So one of the points, I think, and it comes down to supply chain leadership as well too, is making investment decisions, especially you know, at difficult times. And that's some questions about ROI here. Now, I knew you talked about pulling forward projects which were already effectively maybe in the pipeline, but obviously could be prioritized to serve a customer. So maybe that's a way, if you like, to justify an ROI. If you agree or disagree on that. And maybe Antonio, if you could also just talk a bit about, you know, is it really, is some of the tools that you're discussing here, is there still room to invest in new things during this period when there's no doubt budgets under very strict you know, constraints? So maybe we can just start with Antonio on that point, on the ROI point.
No, on this moment we are I don't want to repeat myself, but I think that at the point of time, we really invest a lot on the latest years on this data. We have a team that is working and that is really developing all the templates and all the dashboards that help us really to drive the business, that really they were really tested really well. But really within Visteon, for sure, that we want really to continue to be a leader company within the market, and we are always the latest information, the latest systems that really will make as possible for us really to manage the business to the levels that really the market is required. Of course, that at this point of time we are continuing our plans with our development plans, our implementation in terms of the systems, in terms of processes, and of course that at this point of time a little bit more we are speeding up some of the situations and we are reinforcing them because of course that for some situations we felt the need to have more robust systems and processes during this pandemic phase, and for sure that we are not waiting and will be really implementing the improvements required for us really to have strong processes and stronger systems.
Okay, great, thanks for that. And I knew from your side, I mean, obviously we're talking there about the customer facing kind of systems which are being prioritized, and in terms of also on the logistics and aspects there, I mean, is there still scope to be investing now, even at this time?
Yeah, I think it requires everyone to have a hard chat on what's nice to have versus what's absolutely need to have, right? So, you know, all companies do this. You go through and you look at safety, legal, those types of requirements. You got to keep going. You want to invest in future product, right? What can you defer? So, in an environment of shrinking dollars, the whole ROI question, I think, becomes very interesting because some projects are tough to justify or they get put out in future years because they may have a lower ROI. But another way to look at it now is if you don't have this, you may lose some business. You may lose some revenue, etc. So it's not just, so that changes the ROI, right? So if I don't have contactless service, for example, how much business would I potentially lose, right? So contactless service was built out there for, you know, pick a number, 2 to 3 years from now, based on steady business and, you know, the planned growth, etc. But if I don't have it, do I lose 20, 30, 40% of customers going forward, which then when you build that into the equation, significantly increases the ROI, right? So it takes a little bit of a change in viewpoint on how is it calculated? What happens if I don't do this now, right? And leave it where it is. What will it mean to my business, right? It's always tough to get someone to sign up for increased sales for some of these initiatives, right? It's a lot easier for people to document lost sales if I don't do it, and then that changes the math, right? I mean, we may have some salespeople on the call, but that's just how life is, right? If I put in the service enhancement, it'll help me maintain customers. It won't grow the business, right? But if I put it in and then I take it away, oh wait a minute, I'm going to lose business, right? I don't know how you can have both. So you just have to change how you think about these investments.
Absolutely. So another point I wanted to sort of raise when we talk about managing our teams and indeed even suppliers at times like this, obviously the pandemic raises a totally new dimension when it comes to safety and protecting staff or protecting suppliers, drivers, etc. So I guess obviously we know that lots of measures are in place, be it PPE, be it social distancing. I just wondered, are you within your teams really measuring carefully what's working and again changing based on other kind of measures, whether it's infections happening amongst the teams and things like that, and just maybe if there's any key points, particularly in the supply chain, that you would point to on that. And again, maybe I'll start with you.
I mean, good question. I really don't have a good answer for you, right? We can provide and do everything that we think is absolutely necessary, right? Continue to follow CDC guidelines, which are always evolving. So you can put that in place, but you got to remember that's a third to half of a person's time with you. You don't know what's happening when they're home. So for Mexico example, we run buses to bring employees to work, right? So it's not public transportation. Okay, good. But when they're home or they're out in the market, you don't know, right? So you can put process in place if you see symptoms, if you have a temperature before you come to work, all that kind of stuff, but then you have asymptomatic employees as well. So to me, it's you provide as safe an environment as you absolutely can, but then it's incumbent on everyone to also have safe practices when they are outside of the work environment, right? And anything you do would only work to mitigate it, it won't prevent it, right? So you can offer support and guidance and everything like that, but life in Mexico is different than here, right? And people need to do what they need to do. So you just need to be cognizant of those types of things.
Absolutely. Antonio, would you add anything more from Visteon's side in the global picture that you're looking at?
I agree with Anu. That's essentially, we do everything possible in terms of protocols. We work with the people. I think that everybody is really fully aware, and not too much to add.
Okay, great. So maybe the last question, and I thank you both for all the time you've been giving us. And I knew you kind of raised this before, but I wanted to talk about, just kind of hear some thoughts on motivating your teams and partners, during this particularly difficult time. Anu spoke about purpose before, and I wondered if maybe we might just pick on that just a little bit further. Antonio, maybe starting with you, how do you address that with your teams or working with your provider base? In terms of kind of keeping them motivated and kind of positive, if you like, even during what has been unprecedentedly complicated and difficult times?
One of the things in terms of motivation, because this is difficult times, and as you can imagine, being everyone at home requires a continuous link and in continuous communication in order really to go through this situation. One of the situations, something that I'm doing on the daily basis, I'm having sessions with globally with the entire team. I'm adding one on the morning, another one on the afternoon that is voluntary and that everybody really can join within the global supply chain. And really we'll discuss, it's like a kind of supply chain, Visteon supply chain news. We talk about what really happened on the day before. We talk about the projects. We talk about also some personal situations. I'm also sharing a little bit of some my hobbies and some music and so on to this. We really take the business serious, and taking the business serious, we really discuss among all of us within the supply chain globally, the issues that are happening, the way that we should react. I saw people really from Brazil sharing things with people that are in Thailand and so on. That really is the beauty of all these virtual connections and so on. And I think that also I think that I feel the team a little bit more motivated than was before, because before this kind of relationships, at least I was not really having them. I was having once a month a meeting with everyone, but right now we talk every day, twice a day, one for the morning really to cover Asia, and another one in the afternoon to cover Mexico. And I'm glad that they're in Portugal on the middle. But really, I need to tell you that really we are much more in the communication today is reinforced. We are more in touch. I really feel that the teams across the globe, they know what is in the company much more right now than was before, and this is something that really I'm taking as really a lessons learned, as something that I want really to continue, continue. And all of this, I can also feel that really Visteon has really a very strong team, and I really can feel that the team is really motivating in order really to go through this phase and really to turn the company and really to learn from everything that this pandemic is giving us on the positive side in order really to translate in really business advantage.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. Anu, any closing words on that?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts. I think Antonio said it very well, right? So we talked about purpose. Communication, I think, is absolutely key. As when we were in the middle of this, right at the beginning, or at the beginning and in the middle, we had daily leadership calls with our CEO, the region leaders, et cetera, talking through the plans, not for 3-4 weeks down the road, for today, tomorrow, the next day, right? And similar to Antonio, I have daily calls with my team at 2 o'clock right after those meetings. So there is maybe a 3-hour gap between what we talk about with the leadership team and then how do we support what we need to support the overall plan, right? So I think that is key, brings that transparency, the alignment, understanding what's going on with the business, and leads to quicker decisions and movement. People miss human interaction at work, right? So things like this. We host all employee webcasts, right, through Microsoft Teams, right? So people hear directly from us and see us. We've had teams that do virtual happy hours on Fridays as part of their staff meetings, just so they can see each other. So I think that has helped. And then, Volkswagen Group as a company, right? Other companies had to take actions necessary to ensure their viability with either pay reductions or a certain number of furloughs, et cetera. And as a whole, Volkswagen Group of America kept everybody employed, right? As Chattanooga was down, we did go furlough, but with a stimulus package and some of the payments that we had, people were whole financially, right? And I think when people see the company cares for them, you get more loyalty, buy-in to what we're doing and why we're doing it, right? So it's a combination of lots of things, right, that Antonio talked about. So communication, purpose, commitment to the employees, and then their commitment to the company, right? In general, you can feel that has grown as we've gone through this. The question will be, what's that look like 12, 18 months from now, right, on the other side of this and a vaccine? So I'm hoping it's there and those relationships stick. But I could give you, 500 stories of individual groups that have done different things that come to light that I think are fantastic, right? We got an individual that makes deep dish Chicago pizzas. They're a Chicago native, and they drop them off for the teams at their doors on weekends, right? Just things like that would never have happened.
Well, fantastic. Well, I mean, can't think of anything better to end it on than the thought of a deep dish Chicago pizza. I do think that those are all really important points on the commitment side, and obviously, you know, how showing the care from the company, and then obviously the camaraderie around it. And I think that very much applies across the supply chain as well as other parts of the business. We're going to have to start wrapping it up. So I do want to thank again both of our guests really for the fantastic input and spending all the time answering my questions and audience questions. And there's a few others that we didn't get to, so we'll probably share them with afterwards so we can get some answers. And there's a lot more we can talk about in this subject, of course. But thanks to both of you so much for your time and input on that. Really appreciate it. Just before I close, I just want to mention our partners again: Proact International, Fract Logistics Solutions, again, supply chain IT specialists, C&W Courier Network, a key premium freight company, HAL, Horizon Auto Logistics, and Inform, key software and optimization provider across the logistics and supply chain. Keep with us. We got plenty more to come over the next month as part of the weekly live streams and our festival transformation. You can see some of the programs we have coming up. Hopefully there's a lot of there that'll be interest to you. We're building towards a season finale, and if you're lucky, if I'm lucky, I might just survive it until then, but we'll see about season 2. We're going to have multiple sessions during that finale with focusing on some returning guests and some new guests covering topics, so we'll have more on that. But watch out for everything still to come every week. You won't want to miss it. This is just a few of the speakers that we have coming up over the next month, with a lot more to come. So keep with us. Go to our website on our festival transformation page. If you're already registered for the series, so look out for the communications coming up around it. Thanks again to all of our guests. Thanks again to our team who helped make this possible. Get in touch with us if any questions that you have at any point, or ideas to get involved. And again, we're really pleased that so many of you continue to tune in with us each week. So thanks again. Stay motivated, stay safe. We are in for a sunny couple of days here in London. So if you got similar weather, please go and enjoy it where you can, but safely. And we'll see you next week for the next live stream hour, which will be focusing again on digitalization and on artificial intelligence. So don't miss it. See everybody next week. Have a great week and talk to you soon.
Stay safe.
Bye now.